Good evening, everyone. My name is Paul Rose. I am the Dean of Case Western Reserve University School of Law, and my academic specialty includes international business law, so I'm really thrilled to be welcoming you to the 15th Annual American Society for International Law Midyear meeting. As a member of the host committee, I want to thank my fellow host committee members, their firms, their corporations, for co-sponsoring this really extraordinary conference. Our law school is one of the oldest law schools in the country, and it has long been known for its specialty in international law. It's really one of the things that I think defines us and one of the things that we really excel at. And at the center of that, since 1991 particularly, is the Frederick K. Cox International Law Center. It has been training the next generation of international lawyers while making an impact locally, nationally, and globally. It has a $5.7 million endowment, and it serves really as the hub of the law school's nationally ranked international law program, as well as the Canada-US Law Institute, the Institute for Global Security Law and Policy, the Henry T. King Junior War Crimes Research Office, the Yemen Accountability Project, the Immigration Law Clinic, and the Case Western Reserve Journal of International Law, as well as Dean Sharf's Talking Foreign Policy radio show and podcast. As one of the longest ASIL academic partners, our law school really was thrilled to be selected as the venue for the mid-year meeting, as well as for the fall ASIL Executive Council meeting, both of which are bringing international law luminaries and rising stars to our campus. And I really want to thank Michael Sharf, our Associate Dean for Global Affairs and most recent past Dean of this law school, for his extraordinary leadership in bringing this conference to fruition. It's really his vision, his tireless efforts that have made it possible for ASIL to come to Cleveland and Case Western Reserve. We're very proud of our university. We're very proud of our city. No one knows how to show off our city quite like Michael does. You'll have a great time here with us. And I'm so grateful here for his continued guidance and for all of the effort that he put in planning this, and really the energy and creativity that he brought to this. And I'd like to take a moment to thank him. If you could join me in a round of applause. So just a little bit about this conference. We had a record 220 academics and practitioners who answered ASIL's call for abstracts to speak at this conference. I congratulate the 90 of you here today who were selected, and look forward to hearing some of your presentations over the next couple of days. From 32 submissions, our Journal of International Law has selected 18 for publication in our spring 2026 symposium volume, and we will announce those tomorrow at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Again, another great venue that we have here in Cleveland. So the theme of this conference, Turning Points and Paradigm Shifts in International Law, could not be more timely or important. We are in the midst of tumultuous times for international law and, of course, for international institutions. But the through line of the 32 panels and 3 keynote speeches is that international law is as relevant as ever, even as it changes to respond to changing times. So over the next hour, you'll hear from a couple of our alums, Mark Griffin, who's the Chief Legal Counsel of the City of Cleveland, and Mayor Justin Bibb of the City of Cleveland. And then Melita Hodgson, the President of ASIL, will introduce our opening speaker, Mark Ellis, the Executive Director of the International Bar Association. And then after the speeches, you are, of course, free to tour outside. Brought some beautiful weather along. And of course, this is one of Cleveland's cultural gems, the Botanical Gardens. And so we're really pleased that you're here and able to tour around here as well. And with that, it's now my pleasure to welcome Mark Griffin. Mark.
Thank you, Dean, and thank you to all of you. As the Law Director of the City of Cleveland, it's my pleasure to welcome you and a great honor to welcome you and the American Society for International Law's mid-year meeting. So on behalf of the City of Cleveland, I want to thank Case Western Reserve University and Case Western Reserve Law School and all of our supporting partners for helping to make this happen. We greatly appreciate everything here. I also want to thank Jones Day for their partnership in hosting this important gathering. Now, according to the City of Cleveland's charter from 1913, whenever the mayor of Cleveland steps a foot outside of the city boundaries, the law director becomes the acting mayor of the City of Cleveland. So, strange as it may seem, so it may be that either the founding fathers had really faith in the rule of law, or perhaps they were the lawyers who wrote the charter. But either way, it is my pleasure to welcome all Clevelanders back home to Cleveland. And when I say all Clevelanders, I mean all of you. Because here in Cleveland, if you ever have a cup of coffee here, we claim you as our own. So whether you are LeBron James, who is lived his life here, or whether you spent 2 summers in summer theater like Tom Hanks, we claim you as Clevelanders. And so then wherever you go, we claim your successes as our own. So as you think about the great things, we will take credit for you. So welcome to you as Clevelanders here in the City of Cleveland. Because it is a home that is absolutely reinventing itself and re-energizing itself as a place for international law and a place for engaging with the world as we reach out to touch different parts of the world economically, politically, and socially. What you do is critically important. So bringing you here home to Cleveland is truly an honor for us, and we welcome you here today. With that being said, we are truly fortunate to be joined virtually by the real mayor of Cleveland, Justin M. Bibb. Mayor Bibb is a graduate of this law school, Case Western Reserve Law School, and is committed to positioning our city as a city that's engaged with the world, a city that values the rule of law, and a city in which international cooperation and conversation is a dialogue across borders. And so it's now my privilege to introduce a brief video message from Mayor Bibb offering his official welcome to the American Society of International Law and to all of you new Clevelanders gathered here in our city of Cleveland. Welcome.
I'm Mayor Justin Bibb, and on behalf of the City of Cleveland, I'm proud to welcome you to the 2025 mid-year meeting of the American Society of International Law. We're honored to host this influential gathering of global legal minds, practitioners, scholars, and students, and corporate leaders, right here in the heart of Cleveland. I want to thank ASIL, Case Western Reserve University School of Law, and our outstanding host committee for making this possible. Cleveland is a city that's deeply connected to the world. As an international Great Lakes port, we've always looked outward, leading in industries like healthcare, advanced manufacturing, and the arts. And we're proud to be a city that values innovation, inclusion, and global collaboration. This week, you'll get a glimpse of what makes our city so special. From the beauty of the botanical gardens to an unforgettable night at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Cleveland is ready to inspire you. While you're here, I encourage you to explore University Circle, visit our amazing lakefront, discover our neighborhoods, and enjoy the great food, culture, energy that makes our city unique. Have a productive, meaningful, and inspiring mid-year meeting. Once again, welcome to the great city of Cleveland, Ohio.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you to the mayor for that very warm welcome. I'm Melida Hudson. I'm the president of the American Society of International Law, and it's my honor to introduce our keynote speaker, Mark Ellis. Mark Ellis is the executive director of the International Bar Association and a fellow at King's College in England. Prior to joining the IBA, he spent 10 years as the executive director of the Central European and Eurasian Law Initiative, CELI, a project of the American Bar Association. CELI remains one of the most extensive international pro bono legal assistance projects ever undertaken by the U.S. legal community. Mark also served as legal advisor to the Independent International Commission on Kosovo, chaired by Justice Richard Goldstone, and was appointed by OSCE to advise on the creation of Serbia's War Crimes Tribunal. Twice a Fulbright Scholar at the Economic Institute in Zagreb, Croatia, he earned his BS and his JD degrees from Florida State University and his PhD in law from King's College. Mark is a frequent speaker and media commentator on international legal issues. He has published extensively on international humanitarian law, war crimes tribunals, and the development of the rule of law. And his op-eds have appeared in the New York Times, the International Herald Tribune, the Huffington Post, and the London Times. His most recent book, co-authored with Ambassador David Sheffer, is 5 Pillars for Humankind, published by Springer in 2025. Mark will be speaking about his book and the UN 80. Mark, thank you and welcome. Please join me now.
What an honor it is for me to be back here in Cleveland and at Case Western. I want to acknowledge this wonderful friendship that I've had in the past with this law school, and particularly with Professor Michael Scharf. But I have to say, I would not have accepted this invitation had I known that the Cleveland Guardians were playing tonight. I wouldn't have told Michael why I didn't accept it, but nonetheless. So usually I'm not a fan of people checking their phones, but tonight, go right ahead and do that. If I hear cheers, I assume it will be for what I've said, not for home runs from Cleveland. But I really am just delighted to be here back at Case Western and also here with all of you. I'm a huge fan of ASIL and what it does. Michael Cooper, good friend sitting back, what a remarkable job he does with the ASIL. And it's as important probably today than at any other time, at least in my lifetime, and what the society does and is doing. Last week I was in Ukraine. It was my 10th visit since the full-scale invasion. And every time I go to Ukraine, I find myself in the evening, even though there's a mandatory blackout often, but I wander down to an area in the city, and it's a wall that it's almost endless in length. And on that wall are pictures, again, endless pictures of Ukrainian soldiers and sometimes civilians who have been killed in this war over the last 3.5, almost 4 years. And I think to myself, as I stand there in the evening with no light other than perhaps the moon shining down, that we are in Europe, and I'm looking at the most brazen violation of international law since World War II. And I have to say, and I apologize for these words, but I get somewhat despondent that this country and this administration are not standing up for Ukraine in the midst of this war. This administration's complicity in Russia's war against Ukraine is, for me, unconscionable. President Trump's willingness not only to tolerate, but even to endorse Russia's actions marks the single most flagrant capitulation of U.S. foreign policy in modern history. His readiness to abandon the transatlantic alliance in favor of an authoritarian regime headed by an indicted war criminal reveals not only a betrayal of America's historic role of shaping the international order, but also a disregard for the principles that have preserved global stability for nearly 8 decades. But is also a reflection for me of something even more sinister. We are currently witnessing a moment of profound transformation in the United States. A nation once a beacon of the rule of law, impartial, predictable, rooted in equality, is now facing a slow but steady erosion of these very ideals. The growing influence of forces that elevate loyalty over legality, passionate conviction over reasoned principle, and power over justice threatens the very fabric of our society. This is not a distant or hypothetical concern. It is a pressing issue that requires our immediate and unwavering attention, as well as powerful action. The rule of law is not a dry, legalistic abstraction. It is the great equalizer, the silent guardian of our most cherished freedoms. It is what ensures that all individuals, regardless of their wealth, their status, their political influence, are held accountable to the same standards. It guarantees that rights are not mere privileges to be granted or withheld at a whim. And it establishes that leaders are servants of the people, not the other way around. It has been said that the beauty and strength of the rule of law lie in the inherent neutrality of the meaning. No one, the human rights community, business community, even authoritarian governments object to it. And yet, despite this widespread acceptance, no single political idea has been so widely accepted and widely endorsed, and at the same time been so vigorously contested. And the question then is why? I think part of the answer lies in the very fact, in the very meaning of the rule of law, that law, this concept possesses an inherent elasticity in its meaning. But this elasticity presents a real challenge to the international community, as it allows the definition to be shaped and manipulated to serve various political agendas. For example, we know that the more formalistic approach to the rule of law contends that the principle must remain distinct and separate from the concept of democracy, of social justice, of equality, and even human rights. But for me, this perspective is fundamentally incorrect. The rule of law cannot and should not be reduced to a mere set of institutions, statutes, and procedures. Lone Fuller was right when he said that the law is about the moral good. Law should be grounded in norms of justice, carefully shielded from the capricious and self-serving exercise of government power. Because too often, governments attempt to hide their abuses behind a carefully constructed facade of laws, clear, publicized, and upheld by compliant judges, yet still ignore the substantive components of the rule of law. And unjust governments can, and frequently do, flout basic legal principles and even commit egregious violations of human rights, all while maintaining the appearance of a functioning legal institution. And this is precisely what we are seeing unfolding in this country today. Even though the country upholds formal definition of the rule of law, we are witnessing the alarming expansion of arbitrary power of the state, fueled by a rise of both populism and nationalism. These forces grow louder precisely when and where the rule of law is allowed to grow quiet. Populism is based on this unwavering loyalty to a particular political leader whose skillful use of anti-establishment rhetoric asserts that the leader is the sole representative of what is the real people. Populism is seductive precisely because it tells people what they want to hear, validating their existing beliefs and desires. It promotes the idea that they are the true inheritors of the nation, and that their identity alone entitles them to ownership of the future. Populism and populists routinely seek to challenge or usurp the media, the judiciary, the universities, and other vital institutions of civil society. It erodes trust in institutions, undermining their ability to serve as checks on the power and as a source of reliable information. And nationalism is even more sinister. It is characterized by a rigid us versus them mentality and is often draped in xenophobia, venomous intolerance, and a weaponized hatred of those deemed to be others. And when populism and nationalisms, even though they are distinct in ideologies, their movements are often interlinked and they are mutually reinforcing. So a populist will readily align him or herself with nationalism, whether it's on the far right or far left. Mr. Trump is a populist nationalist who skillfully extracts elements of both ideologies to advance his own personal agenda. He divides rather than unites. He does not elevate common bounds. He fractures them. He trades the hard, painstaking work of justice for the quick and easy rhetoric of grievance. The result is an unmistakable slide towards authoritarianism. And throughout history, nations facing profound movements in insecurity have turned away from the impartiality of law and towards the raw power of authoritarianism. And the consequences of such a turn are tragically familiar. The silencing of dissent, the weaponization of the justice system, the marginalization of vulnerable populations, and the progressive weakening of democracy itself. So I will conclude with these remarks, and I will say that authoritarianism is in fact emerging in the United States. It is true, it is also engulfing other regions of the world, and with it a shameless and open disregard of the most basic and fundamental elements of the rule of law. Mr. Trump's attack against the liberal order, though, is contagious, lending legitimacy to autocratic leaders across the globe. This trend is a dangerous and destabilizing development that is worsening. Indeed, the numbers speak for themselves. Last year alone, out of 147 countries surveyed, more than half lost ground on the rule of law than gained. The values and ideas associated with liberal democracies, values that have been the foundation of international order since the Second World War, and which were celebrated and reinforced with the fall of the Berlin Wall, are rapidly disappearing from view. And as these values fade, a growing sense of resignation to autocratic rule emerges. The result of this is nothing less than an existential threat to the rule of law on a global scale. The fact that we are witnessing it here in the United States is particularly alarming. The traditional guardrails that were designed to protect our democracy, the separation of powers, are no longer functioning as intended. The foundational principles of the U.S. Constitution are being undermined and disregarded. The president now wields unfettered authority. He is weaponizing the state apparatus for political agendas. And the question for us is, will we allow this cycle of decline to repeat in our time? Will we accept the erosion of the rule of law as inevitable? Or will we actively and resolutely fight back through vigilance, through acts of courage, and through the shared commitment to restoring and protecting the rule of law? The rule of law is not perfect, nor has it always been applied equally. However, it remains the strongest and most effective safeguard we have against tyranny. If we abandon it now, we will allow it to further to deteriorate in the face of the rising populism and nationalism that I mentioned. And then we risk losing not only the very foundation of our democracy, but also the prospect of a just and equitable future for generations to come. Last month, I brought my 17-year-old son to visit Auschwitz. And while in Krakow, we visited the church of Pope John Paul II, a man who dedicated his life to defending the dignity and freedom of all people. And I came upon one of his statements uttered in 1991. He said, "History demonstrates that a democracy without values easily turns into open and thinly disguised totalitarianism." These words serve as a stark reminder of the fragility of democracy. We cannot be the generation that stood by idly while the foundations crumbled. Let us be the generation that actively renewed democratic principles, that rejected the easy comfort of exclusion and division, and that insisted a country's greatness lies not in the easy comfort of populist nationalism, but in the enduring strength of the rule of law. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Mark said he's happy to take some questions from the audience. We do have a microphone right there, and so just stand behind the microphone and come on back up, Mark.
Well, somebody tells me what's the game.
Mark, I don't know if this is turned on. Is it? Thank you. With all due respect, can you please tell us what you really think? And don't sugarcoat it this time.
Can I ask, I will say this, and and because I know we have great leaders here from this university, part of the chilling effect that's occurring is the very fact that I sent my remarks, which I have never done, to Michael Scharf. And I said, and I hope I don't get him in trouble, I said, I'm doing this out of respect for you. I'm doing this out of my concern that I'm at your university. And I can tell you, here's what I'm going to say. And if you told me that this might be too much, then I won't do it. I waited with bated breath, and he wrote back and said, you should not change a word. And that's the kind of leadership you have at this university, actually. And listening to the dean speak as well, I think this is a remarkable group of leaderships that you have here, Dean.
I did want to ask a real question, Mark. Those of us who care about international law find ourselves in a defensive posture right now. Are we right to defend everything across the board, or are there places that you see where we should be negotiating, maybe rethinking some of this edifice that we've built over the last 80 years or so? I mean, where do we engage, and where do we draw a red line? Thank you.
Yeah. I think for me, the red lines are being drawn right now on those who would like to take back and limit or in some way damage these principles. So I tend, as I tried to reflect in my remarks, to try to reinforce these most basic fundamental principles. And that's part of what I'm suggesting, is that we need to come back to that. If we lose that understanding, if we lose the commitment to these principles, the rest of us won't matter. That's how fundamental it is for me. And as Michael had alluded to, we just came out with a publication with Ambassador Sheffer on the 80th anniversary of the Charter, and going back to that time and digging into the primary sources, documents, and rereading everything that was done then, I was really inspired by what the world did 80 years ago, and it was based on these very principles that I think are under attack now. So I want to remind the world and all of us on these 80 years and what has been created. It's all been created based on these fundamental principles. If we fail to understand that, if we lose our commitment to those, then I'm fearful, in exactly how I've articulated it, that we're just going to continue to crumble. Sorry, that's so depressing. I go to bed at times thinking this is so depressing for me. But anything else on that? Oh, yeah.
Thank you so much, sir, for your eloquent call to action. I have been deeply moved and deeply shocked at what we're observing day by day, sometimes hour by hour, in terms of the crumbling of the very values and traditions that you've been talking about. So I've been standing on the sidelines, not sure how to activate my own passion about this. I really don't know what to do. I'm looking for some sort of manifesto or some sort of, thing that I can go to or say something about. Do you have, and I hate to pose it this way to you, but do you have concrete ideas in terms of what we as citizens, Americans, lawyers, law professors can do to express the way we feel about what's going on today?
It's a great question, and I think you've answered it in some ways already by saying to be able to express those views and those opinions and to keep that voice. I was in New York these past 2 days, and I was actually to watch some of these groups that are there, and not enough of them, but there really was a strength there of kind of the rising voice of those that are in shock at what is happening here. As I've witnessed it in other countries, I live in the UK, I'm seeing it there. That's the most powerful manifestation of action, I think. And that I think is what needs to be done, is we have to elevate that voice. And we're doing it because the consequences are fairly severe, as I've tried to elaborate on, if we don't succeed on that. So keep that up. Yes.
I'm a second-year law student here at Case Western University. I first want to thank you for your speech and the timeliness of it. As a second-year law student, and also as a first-year law student, I can't help but notice the disconnect between the foundations of law that we're learning, the principles of law that we're learning, and the application of it today. We'll learn a foundation of law and constitutional law, and then the next day, that precedent is being heard by the Supreme Court. So maybe I'm alone in this. I don't feel as though I am. There's a sort of discouragement in not knowing whether or not what we're learning today will be applicable tomorrow, much less by the time we graduate and enter practice. So I ask you, what would you tell young lawyers, young future lawyers like myself? What kind of encouragement would you give us in continuing this practice and ensuring us that there will be law to practice tomorrow?
Yeah. Just hearing a young, bright student ask that question is a bit overwhelming, because I can sense that not only the frustration, but of course not only the concerns, but the uncertainty of what those next steps are. I'm old enough to say that I've seen civil society action at times of crises on that. As I say, perhaps not to the degree that we're witnessing right now, but what was always, I think, not only encouraging, but is this ability to stay focused on exactly what you've just said, the foundations. What the foundations of the law, the foundations of the constitutions, of the freedoms that we all take for granted. Don't give up on that. Because if you give up on that, it's game over. And yes, we are at that point. We were at such a critical point in our history, in this country's history, but elsewhere. But I only go back to that point of saying we have to continue to take faith in these founding principles, to speak out on those founding principles, and to say they're worth fighting for. And that's what I would say you need to do.
I'm Shantanice Baxter. I went to law school, my second career, because I wanted to affect change.
Good.
And quickly learned that a lot of our domestic avenues are foreclosed and turned to international law. However, a lot of what international law requires is a camaraderie and a willingness to listen. Here domestically, I believe that we've never had an issue in raising our voices. We take to the streets, but there's so much we can do.
Yeah.
What do you foresee as the international community coming to our aid the way that we have come to other countries' aid before? Because I understand historically the United States has been very influential in a positive, right? And so this is different now, right? And the things that we were doing before, we weren't. Do you feel like the international world will now step up and say, hey, this is wrong, and what you're doing is wrong, and hold us to account? And if so, do you feel that there's any way to make this administration receptive to that at all?
It's, again, a remarkably poignant question. Any surveys that you're seeing in Europe or where I live, whether it's in the UK or anywhere else, the the surveys that have existed in the past and exist now, in the sense of the perception of the United States, has dropped like a rock. It is remarkable to see it. So there is a paradigm shift that's occurred outside the United States in the sense of the view of the U.S. I'm not sure that can be reversed in the short term, and if we're talking about an additional 3.5 years of what we're witnessing now, I have some real doubts about that, because what's happening is that, again, I speak more from my European experience, is that they're beginning to look elsewhere, it's no longer. What we have lost here, we've lost a lot of things, but the one thing that is more depressing, more disturbing for me, is we've lost soft power. We've always had hard power. The United States is military leader on that. But for me, it was always the soft power. It was always the ideas. It was always the concepts we had. When it was mentioned about my involvement with the fall of the Berlin Wall and the work that we did in Central and Eastern Europe and the former Soviet Union, that was driven by soft power. It was driven by the fact that nations, and these newly emerging democratic nations, they didn't look to Europe. They looked to the United States. And that's the soft power that held. That, for me, is the most consequential element of what we're witnessing right now, is this loss of soft power. So getting back to your question, countries are recognizing that, and they're moving on, but with a very heavy heart, with a remarkable sense of this simply cannot be happening, but it is happening, and they're realizing it. It's going to be up to all of you. It's going to be up to this country to pull that back and to bring back this power of soft power and what the country has stood for generations and generations. It's not easy, but I'm convinced that's the direction we've got to take. Yeah.
Hello, sir. I would like to thank you for your time before I begin. My name is Noah Galper, and I'm a current 1L at Case Western Reserve University School of Law, but I am also a first-generation American with parents from the former Soviet Union and Odessa, Ukraine. And before I begin, I would really like to thank you for the emotion and the way you spoke as someone. I really felt connected to what you said, especially with everything going on. And on the same subject, this conflict has been going on for the past 3 or 4 years, and that's essentially the timeline that we're going to be as law students here. So I know there's a lot of emphasis on us learning in school, but what would you say is the best thing that we could do as students while we're on campus and while we have the privilege of attending such a great institution?
Well, again, all of you, the young students, have spoken. You're inspiring, so that's really good. You just have to, what I said before, you just have to continue to activate your voices. That's what it takes. There has to be a sense that, and I think it's growing in that way, but there has to be a sense that what is happening matters, and that you as a first-year student, particularly from your perspective with your family, where your family came from, this is just simply unacceptable. And so use your voice. That's what you have to do, and come together and raise that voice up. That's what we need to do on that.
Thank you.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah.
Can I say I'm very much not a student, alas. That was
no, I was going to. Then I was going to tell the dean and Michael. Well, that's impressive. You got.
Great. So my name's Alex. I'm a former Lord Chancellor and Secretary of State in the UK.
And this could be difficult for me right now with that experience. But go ahead.
No, it's simply to say this, that as outsiders watch what's going on in the United States, and I make my remarks with diffidence. America's a sovereign nation. It's going to make its own decisions. But one of the institutions that we look at now very, very closely is the US Supreme Court.
Yeah.
and what its stance is going to be. So my question is this: to what extent is it possible for a modern Supreme Court in this era to make truly independent decisions, notwithstanding the political appointments of its members?
Well, as a fellow Brit, I say this now with
You're
great...
welcome. No, we'll have you. We'll have you. Based on what you said
Thank
today.
you.
You did very well. You made the grade.
You have to. I swore allegiance to the Queen at that time, so I was very proud to get that citizenship and have dual citizenship now. There are undoubtedly professors in this audience that would be much better qualified to talk about that than I will, but I do think that this is what I was trying to say. If we lose this. If we lose the checks, if we're looking at a judiciary that becomes political on that, and some suggest that that's what's happening, but actually not on the lower federal courts. They seem to be speaking in a pretty significant way, consistent with what I would believe are the constitutional values. But all the eyes are on the Supreme Court on that. I don't yet. I'm not one to make a statement to say that the Supreme Court is political, but I do agree with you that we're in a remarkably political, strained period of time. And so I think the verdict, literally, no pun intended, is still out on that. My experience, Michael will remember this, is that during my days in Sealy, on our board for the 10 years I was there was Justice Sandra Day O'Connor. So I worked with Justice O'Connor every single day. And I can reflect back to the Supreme Court and what she represented at that time versus what I see now, and it's absolutely night and day. So that is a change. I won't go further to say whether that's good or bad, but I will tell you that I was fortunate enough to see the inside workings through her eyes and to be near her. And God, I wish we had her back on that.
Hi, I'm Maddie Kilway. I'm a 1L student here at Case Western as well.
A lot of 1Ls. I love that.
Yeah.
Good.
I would also like to thank you, like everyone else before me has. It was a great speech.
Thanks.
I really enjoyed listening to it. So my question is more on refugees. Given U.S.'s recent policy changes with their immigration laws and accepting refugees, and I've noticed through my own research that I did in my undergrad on refugees specifically from Ukraine, that a lot of European countries at the time of the war were not accepting refugees. Have you noticed a change in that, where more European countries, except for like Poland and Germany, are accepting refugees because they can't come here?
Well, I would counter that a little bit by saying that my experience in the UK, for instance, but elsewhere, when I travel in Poland and France and everywhere, the policy has been absolutely open door in that. Now, the question is whether that continues as the war moved on.
Yes.
Those countries that said we're going to take in a significant number of Ukrainians because they were on the eastern side, there was no hesitation on that. In where I live in the UK, absolutely. I mean, extraordinarily generous on that. But as this war continues and moves forward, of course, people's attention moves, frustrations rise up. I haven't yet seen a counter to it yet. I think it has slowed down. But it's one of the proudest things for me, is, if I can say as a European, to have watched European countries, not all, but most of them, open and embrace these refugees that were living in horrendous situations. So.
Yeah, sorry, I guess I should have specified like 2023 and 2024, because there were some countries like Hungary and Switzerland that the people didn't want them there. So like,
Yeah.
what are European policies doing to
and
make them feel
here it gets back to this
integrated?
point that I said earlier in this immigration issue here in the United States and Europe. That is a touch paper, particularly for the more right-wing politicians and parties. They go to that issue more than any place else. That's what they go to on this. But it's what's frustrating is it's not a open, logical discussion about it. It's a weaponized discussion about it. It's not even a discussion. It's a weaponized policy that has brought this huge response that's based on this hatred simply because, and it gets back to this populist nationalism that I talked about, simply because they're different. We should have a rational, open discussion on immigration policy. I would never say we shouldn't have that. Countries have a right to do that. But it's how it's being done that is the problem. That is causing, as a consequence, this rise of this nationalism, populism that I talk about, and that's what's dangerous on that. So the issue itself is a real issue in Europe. It's a real issue in the UK, but it's how it's being dealt with. That's the danger of it, not the issue itself.
Hello. I'm a Thrill from the University of Minnesota, so adding on to the cadre of students asking questions.
Good.
But I did want to take advantage of the opportunity of having somebody with your level of experience working in international law here to ask about two parallel situations that keep evolving and are probably going to be a crisis moment for international law and intergovernmental institutions. The first being that the crisis in Gaza has really put a kind of strain on how we consider the actual power and pressure of both international institutions and international experts, because we have a democratic country that has signed on to many of international human rights treaties, and yet the situation keeps worsening and worsening. And I wonder what that says about the ability of these institutions we work so hard to preserve and endorse going forward if a country that is democratic keeps perpetuating, like taking actions that seem kind of out of line with international human rights standards. And second, where do you think the increasing recognition by states of Palestine as a state will go going forward, especially in this increasingly tense international situation?
Right.
And I'm sorry if it's a little bit, you know.
No. I think these questions one should be able to talk about, and I speak about them from a legal point of view. But I will, on your first point, say something to students, is because you're right, you can look at international law, international legal institutions and goes, what's the point of this? Why do we matter? Because no one's following it anyway, no one's adhering to it. Always bifurcate the legal structures, the foundations, including the entities, always bifurcate that from the political will. Completely different. So not to criticize the institutions, not to criticize the law that has emerged from these institutions, or from the treaties, or from customary international law, or from the movements of societies to say there should be legal standards, there should be policies, principles that we should abide by as international community. That we should embrace, we should continue to work that, and we shouldn't criticize that. And we certainly shouldn't blame it because a democratic country decides not to follow it. The pressure and the emphasis should be on the political willingness of the country. It's a political issue, it's not a legal issue. And your second question, had to do with the Palestinian state. You know, there's a kind of de jure and de facto aspects of what's happening in the Middle East. I've been there many times. The IBA is involved with it many times. The question for me is not really whether or not de jure Palestine will exist as a independent state and should be recognized as such. I've been on record to say the two-state solution is what I support. It's whether actually de facto it will ever be possible, because when you look at what's happening, the disintegration of that two-state policy, the reality of being able to create a state, an independent state, is really questionable. That gets to the political question back to.
Hi, I'm Taylor Kilpatrick from the American Society of International Law. I'm actually just here to thank everyone for asking amazing questions, especially our students. Please keep asking these important questions anytime you get the chance. You all ask really wonderful questions. To thank Mark, and also to turn it over to Michael Scharf to close us out for the evening. Thank you so much.
So the important thing about these conferences is that we have thought-provoking speeches like the one you just heard from Mark Ellis, and then we have a chance to talk about those speeches. So we have these premises for another hour, and I encourage you not to run away and go back to your hotels, but to stay around and have conversations. And while you're doing that, walk over to the glass house and see the Costa Rica rainforest and the Madagascar spiny desert. They will inspire you to continue to talk about these things. And then we will see you bright and early tomorrow. Thank you all, and thank you, Mark.